Hello everyone. Imagine moving into your dream apartment quiet neighborhood. A fresh start, a perfect room for your newborn. But then, your baby starts smiling into empty corners. The lights flicker. The nursery grows cold. And one afternoon you see a man tall, pale, and not supposed to be there standing in the doorway. Would you believe what you saw? Or would you tell yourself it was just the stress of being a new parent? What would you do if your child acted like they weren't alone, even when they were? Tonight's story is about a family who discovered that some homes don't want to let go of the past. Stay with me. What happens next will haunt you. When Hannah Moore and her husband Caleb first arrived in Fairview Springs, it felt like a fresh start. The town was small and quiet, tucked away in the hills of Oregon, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down and everyone knew your name. They were young, just 19 and 22, with a new baby, and dreams of finally building a life together away from the noise and chaos of the city. Their new apartment was on the ground floor of an old two-story home that had been divided into separate units years ago. The wood creaked underfoot, and the air smelled faintly of pine and dust, but it was affordable. More importantly, it felt safe. Too safe. Too quiet. Hannah quickly chose the front room as the nursery for baby Lucy. It had a large window facing the street, and the sunlight poured in during the mornings. She thought it would be perfecta, cozy little space, full of warmth and life. And for the first few weeks, everything was perfect. Lucy slept soundly through the night, rarely cried, and always seemed content. Almost too content. She'd place Lucy in her crib and return to the kitchen, only to hear soft coos of laughter coming from the room a few minutes later. It was comforting at first. What new mother wouldn't be relieved to have such an easy baby? But the more time passed, the more Hannah began to feel a strange unease. Lucy didn't cry when she was left alone. She didn't even fuss. She would lie there, gurgling happily, her tiny eyes locked on something or someone in the far corner of the room. At first, Hannah brushed it off. Babies stare into space all the time, right? Maybe it was the shadows or the light from the curtains. But one afternoon, everything changed. It was a warm Sunday. Caleb had gone out to pick up some groceries, and Hannah was washing dishes in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting long, golden streaks on the floor. The whole house was quiet, except for the soft sound of running water and Lucy's distant babbling. Then a coldness. It hit her like a wave. The sunlight vanished in an instant, as if someone had thrown a blanket over the sky. The warm glow turned to dull gray, and the air grew heavy. The hairs on her arms stood up. She turned off the faucet and stood still, listening. That's when she saw it. From the kitchen, she had a clear line of sight down the hallway to Lucy's room. The door was open. The room beyond it, strangely darker than the rest of the house. And then he appeared. A man, standing in the doorway of her daughter's room. He was tall, maybe just under 6 feet, but impossibly thin, unnaturally so. His posture was rigid, like his joints weren't quite right. His skin looked grayish in the dim light, and his face was wrong. Distorted, twisted, as if someone had taken a human face and stretched it, pulling the features just a bit too far in the wrong directions. But he wasn't looking at Hannah. He was staring straight into the nursery, at Lucy. Then, in one fluid, silent step, he disappeared into the room. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. Her body was frozen for a moment. Just one single, terrifying moment. And then instinct took over. She ran down the hallway, barefoot, on the cold wooden floor, not thinking, not breathing, only one thought in her mind. Lucy. She reached the doorway, slammed into the frame, and looked inside. The room was empty. No one there. Only Lucy, giggling softly in her crib, and staring into the corner, smiling. At first, Hannah chalked it all up to luck. Lucy was a quiet, easy baby, unusually easy. She didn't fuss when she was laid down. She didn't scream in the middle of the night. There were no colicky fits or sleepless breakdowns. Just peace. That should have been a blessing. And yet, it unsettled her. Every time Hannah peeked into the nursery, Lucy would be lying in her crib, smiling eyes wide, arms softly reaching into the air like she was playing with someone invisible. Sometimes she giggled, that sweet little baby laugh echoing into the hallway, warm and high-pitched. But she was alone. Or at least, she was supposed to be. One night, around 2:30 a.m., Hannah awoke from a light sleep, feeling restless. Caleb was snoring softly beside her. The monitor on her nightstand was quiet, no crying, no movement. But something felt off. She stared at the monitor for a moment, then got up to check on Lucy. As she crept down the hallway, she noticed the nursery door was slightly ajar. She was sure she'd closed it earlier. Just as she reached for the handle, a soft noise drifted from inside. A whisper, not a baby noise, not cooing or babbling. It was a low, breathy murmur, like a voice, but it wasn't saying words, not one she could understand. It almost sounded like humming. Hannah flung the door open. Lucy lay in her crib, wide awake. Her tiny arms stretched up like she was reaching for someone. Her face lit up in joy as soon as she saw Hannah. But her eyes, they weren't looking at her mother. They were fixed on the far corner of the room, the very same corner where Hannah had seen him disappear days earlier. She stood frozen, every hair on her body standing on end. The room was freezing cold, far colder than the rest of the house. Her breath fogged in the air. She wrapped Lucy in a blanket and carried her out, not looking back at that shadow-filled corner. Not even once. From that night on, Hannah refused to let Lucy sleep in that room alone. Caleb was confused. He hadn't seen the man in the hallway. He hadn't heard the whisper. He hadn't felt that unnatural cold creeping up his spine like fingers made of ice. All Hannah could tell him was the truth. Something's not right here, Caleb. She's not alone in that room. I don't care what you say, I know what I saw. They moved the crib to the back bedroom, closer to their own room. But the house didn't let them forget. Every night after that, as they lay in bed, they heard soft thuds. Not from the upstairs neighbor, not from the street, but from Lucy's old room. Thud, drag, thud. Like someone pacing slowly, or dragging something heavy across the floor. And Lucy? She would still stare down the hallway, into the dark, and smile. It had been a few days since they moved Lucy's crib into the back room. Since then, Hannah had avoided the old nursery like it was contaminated. Even during the day, she refused to go near it. Something about that room felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else now. But that afternoon, while Caleb was still at work and Lucy slept peacefully in the new room, Hannah stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes. Sunlight streamed through the window. The house was calm. For a moment, she thought maybe things were getting better. Then came the cold. Instant, piercing, paralyzing. She didn't hear the wind. She didn't feel a draft. But the warmth vanished, swallowed by a chill that sunk deep into her bones. She slowly turned off the faucet. From the kitchen, the hallway stretched straight to the door of Lucy's old room. And that's when she saw him. A man, standing perfectly still in the doorway of the empty nursery. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, and impossibly thin. His posture was wrong, like his limbs bent in places they shouldn't. He wore old, dark clothing, hanging off his frame like wet rags. But it was the face that shattered her. She only saw a glimpse of it turned partially away, but it was off, twisted, like someone had melted a wax figure and let it harden wrong. His mouth was slightly open, frozen mid-expression, and his eyes black and sunken stared deep into the corner of the room where Lucy's crib used to be. And then, he moved. With a slow, deliberate step, he crossed the threshold into the empty room. Gone. Just like that. No sound, no sign of entry. Just Hannah, standing frozen in the kitchen, the air thick with something unnatural. Her body trembled. The memory of Lucy smiling into that very corner stabbed into her mind. She turned and ran to the back bedroom. Lucy was still there, safe, sleeping. But Hannah knew something terrible. Lucy wasn't the only one being watched. Something deep inside her snapped. Before she even realized what she was doing, Hannah dropped the dish in her hand, water splashing across the counter. Her bare feet hit the floor hard as she bolted down the hallway, every inch of her body screaming one thing. Get to the room. Now. No phone, no weapon, no plan, just raw, motherly instinct. She wasn't thinking, she was moving. The hallway stretched like it had grown longer, the shadows seeming to reach for her as she ran. The air grew colder with each step. Her heart thundered against her chest. The door to the old nursery stood wide open now. She didn't slow down. She burst through it and stopped. Dead still. The room was empty. No man, no sound, no footprints. Just that same dusty crib sitting in the corner, long abandoned. The curtains fluttered gently, but the window was shut, locked tight. Not even a breeze could have slipped through. There was nowhere he could have gone. Nowhere. And yet, he was gone. Hannah's breath came in shallow, rapid bursts. She turned in a slow circle, scanning every corner, every shadow, every possibility. She was expecting something. A hidden door, an open closet, a hole in the wall, anything. But there was nothing. And that was somehow worse. The silence in the room pressed in like a vacuum. Her ears rang with it. She could hear the blood rushing through her own veins. And in that stillness she felt it again, that presence. The one she'd felt when she'd first seen him. He was still here, not in sight, but watching. She could feel eyes boring into her from the very walls. The atmosphere thickened, heavy like humidity, but cold like a walk-in freezer. Her fingers tingled. Her legs felt weak. And then, a soft noise, barely audible. A light tap-tap behind her. She spun around. Nothing. She stared at the crib. Empty. Still. But her gaze slowly shifted upward to the far corner above it. The shadows there seemed wrong. Thicker. Moving when they shouldn't. She didn't wait to find out. Hannah backed out of the room, never turning her back, her breath trembling with every step. When she reached the end of the hallway, she turned and ran straight into the back bedroom where Lucy was still sleeping, peacefully, unaware of the nightmare unfolding just a few feet away. Hannah collapsed beside the crib, gripping its wooden frame like a lifeline. For the first time since they moved in, she wanted to scream, but she didn't. She just sat there, shaking. The silence around her now a deafening roar. Somewhere, behind the walls of their perfect little home in Fairview Springs, something was waiting, and it knew she had seen it. Hannah didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until she stepped into the back bedroom. Her eyes darted straight to the crib. And there she was, Lucy, safe, untouched, blissfully unaware. The baby's soft giggle echoed in the quiet room, light and innocent. Her chubby arms reached upward, fingers wiggling like she wanted to be held. For a brief moment, relief surged through Hannah's chest like a wave. Her knees almost buckled. She wanted to cry, to laugh, to collapse on the floor, and thank God that Lucy was okay. But then something stopped her cold. Lucy wasn't looking at her. She was smiling, giggling, reaching up, but not at her mother. Her gaze was fixed, locked on the open doorway behind Hannah. No, not the doorway, just past it. To the corner of the ceiling, where shadows pooled unnaturally, curling like smoke. Hannah's body stiffened. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around. She didn't. She couldn't. She just stood there paralyzed, watching her daughter interact with something. Lucy's expression was joyful, familiar. Her face glowed the way it did when Caleb came home from work. Like she recognized, or what, she was seeing. And that's what terrified Hannah the most. Because whatever Lucy was looking at, she wasn't afraid of it. She knew it. She liked it. It had been here before. The air around them felt wrong again, pressurized, like standing inside a sealed box. The overhead light flickered faintly, casting brief, jerky shadows across the crib. Still, Lucy giggled. A soft, hiccupy sound. And then she extended both arms higher, as if she was waiting to be picked up. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. Number, absolutely not. She rushed to the crib, scooped Lucy into her arms, and clutched her tight to her chest. The moment their bodies touched, the baby shifted her gaze, finally looking at her mother, and let out a small, surprised gasp. She hadn't noticed Hannah was even there. Almost like someone else had her attention first. Hannah backed out of the room quickly, refusing to look into the corner where Lucy had been staring. She closed the door behind her with trembling hands. She didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floor, every tap of the wind against the window, every flicker of the hallway light felt like a whisper from that room. Lucy slept peacefully in their bed, curled into her mother's side. That night, Hannah didn't wait for Caleb to settle in. The second he walked through the door, she blurted it out. "We need to move Lucy's crib. Tonight." He blinked, surprised. "Why?" "She sleeps fine in there." Hannah hesitated. She couldn't tell him what she really saw. Not the man, not the shadow, not the way Lucy had smiled at it like a long-lost friend. I can't hear her if something happens. That room's too far from ours." She lied. Caleb looked confused, but he nodded. "If it makes you feel better." And just like that, the crib was moved to the back bedroom, right beside their bed. Hannah finally allowed herself to breathe, thinking maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. It wasn't. For a few nights, things seemed calm. The hallway stayed quiet. The lights didn't flicker. Lucy still smiled in her sleep, but at least she wasn't reaching into the shadows anymore. Until Friday. Caleb had come home late after a long shift. Hannah was already asleep, Lucy curled beside her in the bed. He tiptoed through the apartment, exhausted, and paused by the hallway light switch. That's when he felt it. A chill, sudden, sharp, like someone had opened a freezer behind him. He glanced down the hallway. The nursery door was open. They had closed it earlier. He was sure of it. Still half asleep, Caleb walked toward the room, rubbing his eyes. Maybe he just forgot to pull it shut. Maybe the latch was loose. Maybe a shadow moved. Inside the nursery. Just a flicker at first. Barely a whisper of motion. He stopped at the doorway. The room was dark. Moonlight spilled through the window, bathing the crib and the rocking chair beside it in silver blue. And then the chair moved. Not gently. It rocked once, twice. Back and forth. Caleb's mouth went dry. There was no wind, no open windows, nothing that could have caused that. He stepped back. The air in the hallway was still thick, still cold. He didn't look into the room again. He didn't say a word when he climbed into bed. But Hannah knew. She felt the way he pulled Lucy closer than usual. The way his arm stayed draped over both of them all night. The way he didn't ask why the door might have been open. He didn't believe in ghosts. But something had changed. Something had looked back at him. And now, it wasn't just Hannah who felt it. They tried to carry on as if everything was normal. But the house wouldn't let them. It started small, the lights. They flickered when no one touched the switch. Bulbs dimmed without reason, then flared back to life like someone had breathed on them. Then came the electric hum, a low vibration in the walls. Caleb noticed it first, his hand brushing against the plaster one evening as he passed the hallway. "You hear that?" he asked. Hannah didn't, at least not at first. But a few nights later, as she lay awake, she heard it too. It wasn't just a hum. It was almost like breathing. The fuse box was fine. The wiring had just been updated. But the power still cut out at random, especially late at night. Sometimes when they were both in bed, the entire apartment would plunge into darkness for a few seconds, then come back on like nothing happened. Then came the footsteps, not above them, not outside, inside. Slow, heavy steps across the living room floor at 2:17 a.m. Caleb had jumped out of bed the first time, grabbing the bat he kept by the door. He found nothing, just silence, and an ice-cold trail leading from the front door to the nursery. Hannah stayed up the next night, listening. It happened again. Same time, same pattern. Step, step, pause, step, and always stopping just short of their bedroom door. They both stopped pretending after that. "I think this place has a history," Hannah whispered one night. Her voice shook. "Something we weren't told." Caleb didn't argue. He had started dreaming. Dreams of standing in that old nursery, watching the shadows grow long and spill across the floor like oil. Dreams where Lucy wasn't in her crib anymore, but the mobile still spun, slowly, to music they didn't recognize. They began asking questions. Neighbors gave them side glances, avoided eye contact. One woman down the hall said the previous tenants left in a hurry. Another muttered something about bad energy and refused to say more. It was like the entire building knew something, but no one wanted to be the one to say it out loud. One night, as Hannah rocked Lucy to sleep, the radio in the corner unplugged, crackled to life. A faint voice whispered through the static. She couldn't make out the words, but it wasn't random. It sounded like a name. And the worst part, Lucy looked up, smiled, and softly whispered it back. The next morning, Hannah couldn't shake the sound of the name Lucy had whispered. She kept playing it over in her mind, over and over again, trying to remember if she'd ever heard it before. But it didn't belong to any friend, neighbor, or storybook they owned. It felt ancient, like something pulled from the walls. Later that afternoon, while Caleb was at work, Hannah decided to do something she'd been avoiding since the day they moved in open the attic hatch. It was located above the enclosed back porch, just outside the kitchen. She dragged a chair underneath and climbed up, heart pounding, dust raining down as she pushed the wooden panel aside. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and forgotten time. At first, she saw nothing, just boxes, some old holiday decorations, a rusted fan. But as her flashlight swept across the far corner, it caught on something odd, a small, wooden chest, no bigger than a shoebox, buried beneath a threadbare tarp. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she pulled it down. The box was locked, but the wood had rotted enough that, with a firm twist, the latch gave way. Inside were photographs faded, black and white. Families. Children. One in particular made Hannah's stomach knot. A picture of a man, tall and lanky, standing stiffly beside a crib. His face was partially damaged, but even blurred, it looked eerily familiar. Beneath the photos was a stack of letters handwritten, ink smudged. The first one began with, "To the next tenant." Hannah froze. She wasn't the first. And suddenly, she understood this apartment hadn't been abandoned over and over by accident. It had been passed down like a curse. So, what do you think? Have you ever experienced something you just couldn't explain? Maybe your childhood home had a strange cold spot, or your baby used to laugh at something no one else could see. If you've ever lived through something like this, or if you have a story you think should be told, let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and who knows, your experience might be the next story I bring to life. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and don't ignore the shadows. Good night.